Productive Pastor 112, keeping a daily log. Hey friends, welcome back to Productive Pastors. Chad Brooks. It's a place online where we talk about healthy ministry through strategic productivity. And this month, I'm going into some core, I think I call them silver bullet concepts to personal ministry productivity. And they almost seem so simple, we might think they don't matter. And they're also not your standard ways or standard things. This episode is all about the daily log. This is my new favorite practice. Like, seriously, this is my new favorite practice. And I've got a download for you if you want to do this. So make sure you cruise over the show notes, revchadbrooks.com/PPP/112 to grab it for free. It's a template. Also, I'm going to link the brand new day sheet that I sold as part of the Memorial Day course, the Productive Pastor Planner Template Pack. You can only get it those 3 days, but I knew leading into it. The day sheet's always there. It's always a resource. But I love this practice of a daily log so much, I told myself, I'm going to end up doing an episode on this and giving access to it. So if you missed that course or you're listening to it like at a future date and say, Chad, this sounds good, man, I need it. I've got both those downloads for you. Just cruise over the show notes, revchadbrooks.com/PPP112, and you can get those for free. My gift to you. But as I said earlier, the daily log is my new favorite productivity practice because ministry has changed. A year ago, I started working part-time as a denominational official. This month, I'm started full-time on July 1 doing this, and I was doing it pretty heavy in the spring. And ministry was changing. It wasn't so much high-level stuff. It was still some good high-level stuff, which I love. I love good high-level stuff. But it also had to be more normalized things. And the best way for me to handle that as a non-detail person was this idea of a daily log. Now, for those of you who struggle with details, like me, you might always be wondering, how do I manage these details? I am in a season right now full of small tasks. Sometimes the most important thing for me to get done that day is 10 5-minute tasks. But those 10 5-minute things are just absolutely so important. And so I've been thinking about, how do I manage, how do I handle, how do I deal with small tasks? And what I found myself was, I'm going in my day sheet like I normally do, but I needed something extra. So where the daily log is important is for if you're in a season of small tasks, or perhaps you want a better picture of what all you are doing at work, or you are in an intentional focused season of work where traction significantly matters. There's going to be times of life in ministry where this happens. Talk about capital campaign season a lot. This is one. When I was in a new church plant, this sort of thing mattered a lot, especially as we were leading up to launch services, as we were leading up to weekly worship, that sort of thing. If you're starting something new or starting something big, it might be a season where keeping a daily log might be really important. Because, I'm an advocate. I'm a big advocate of knowing what you are doing each day. I talk about this all the time. I have a weekly review. Did an episode on that way back in the day. I'll drop a link to that in the show notes about my Sunday preview meeting I do with myself. I love knowing what I'm stepping into. I fill out my day sheet almost every single day. I try to get it actually done at the end of the previous work day, so I'm not, stepping into the office that morning with a blank day sheet. But on my day sheet, I always have this strategy where I write my plan in black. And if anything changes or anything drops in my lap, if there's something I have to be responsive to or whatever, I would write it down in blue ink next to it. And I got to the point of probably 5 months ago, where I realized that the blue ink on my day sheets was telling a second story. And the story it was telling was the what and the why of ministry. And something was going on there. Because productivity, especially in ministry, it's also a journey of understanding how you work, of understanding, what does fulfillment look like? And you have to go through this process for anyone who wants to develop just a personal approach to productivity. In my course, Becoming Productive, the first half of the course and the first 4 or 5, maybe even 6 episodes of Productive Pastor were really about understanding how you work and understanding the psychology of how you work. And I was at the point where I realized, I've got more blue ink than black ink on my day sheet right now. Maybe I need to make some sort of a transition or a change in how I'm approaching the daily aspect of ministry. So how do you use a daily log? For me, it's done in tandem with the day sheet. Or it could just be a page in your notebook or your productivity system or whatever. It's just a log. That's all it is. It's a log. When I do something, regardless if it was my plan or not, I note it in my log. If I have an email I send, I note it in my log. If I have a text message about business or work with somebody, it gets noted in my log. If I have a quick phone call, it gets noted in my log. All these sorts of things, because I want to see where I'm spending my time. And I have a section on the side for notes. Sometimes I want to make notes about the day. If I was particularly derailed, and a lot of times what I've noticed is if I'm particularly derailed more often than not, it doesn't mean that people are interrupting me or I'm necessarily procrastinating more. What it usually means is I'm not planning my workout good enough. Like I don't have a good idea of what ministry is going to look like this day. And my plan is maybe divergent from the reality of truth that is happening. So the daily log can also be a fantastic forensic device as you're just investigating what your own productivity looks like. But then also, and I was on a coaching call with somebody today, it's also just makes you feel really good because you might come and say, man, I didn't get anything done today. I feel like nothing got accomplished. And then I look at my daily log and there's 30 things on there. And I realize, yeah, you might not have gotten that big, huge, high-level thing you wanted to get done. But look at all of the tiny little minute things that you did. And those are most likely driving you towards a bigger purpose in the future. So, what is the daily log doing? It's just doing a bunch of things. It's doing a lot of stuff. Number one, it's keeping track of your work. It's just letting you keep track of your work. It's helping you understand the things that you did not anticipate. And I talked about that earlier. If I'm not anticipating accurately more often than not, that's a me problem. That's the kind of thing I want to, maybe take 20 or 30 minutes to think through and understand, were my goals for this season of ministry wildly inappropriate for what the ministry actually needed? Daily log also, it helps you understand the true nature of your work. And I talked about this earlier with episode 1 of the podcast and just kind of developing a self-understanding of work. And doing that matters so much. If you've never heard me talk about that, or if you're new to the podcast, go back to the very beginning. Check out those first few episodes as we talk a lot about this understanding the nature of work and what ministry looks like for you. Keeping a daily log also helps you understand change. It may be, I'm 44 years old. I've been getting a paycheck from a church in some capacity for 22 years. So half of my life. I've been getting, 23 years. So more than half of my life, I've been getting a paycheck from a church in some way, shape, or form. And ministry has changed so much over the years. And I find this out a lot when I'm talking to other pastors, especially when you hit middle age, it begins to get different and gets weird. If you're in a new season of ministry, you've taken a new role in some ways, that doesn't mean you can automatically copy paste the way that you did things from the past into the present. So that daily log, it really helps you understand change. That might be the biggest takeaway that I'm learning right now. But the daily log also, it helps you track competency and track shifts. Because remember I said earlier, the blue ink tells a second story than the black ink does. A lot of times what I found out is the things I don't anticipate are these spaces of competency that I might not understand. I've talked about conscious competency theory a lot on the podcast before, but it's this idea of, of learning what does it mean to know what you know and moving into that journey and just seeing those shifts. Because that's the thing is, the part of the vocational complication of ministry is a lot of times pastors struggle to understand when they need to get better at something because they struggle to separate that from their spiritual value and their spiritual worth, their spiritual relationship to Jesus Christ. And then also the call to ministry they might have. Just because you got to get better at something doesn't mean Jesus didn't call you into ministry. And that daily log, it helps just understand, all of those things. So remember, if the daily log sounds interesting to you, there's a free download. Go over the show notes, revchadbrooks.com/PPP/112. Grab that. It's free. I send you the day sheet as well as part of that. I would have loved to give this to you because it changes things that much. Would have loved to get this in your hands as part of your rhythm. If you find this conversation interesting, I encourage you to come over to the Productive Pastor community on Facebook. There's over 1,000 pastors there that are talking about ministry, about a healthy ministry through strategic productivity together. There'll be a message thread for this episode, so you can come hang out, share stuff, learn stuff, help each other, because that's not about me. It's about all of us together in this thing that we're building together, because we all have the same goal. We want to have good ministries. We want to be healthy pastors, healthy ministry leaders. We want to sleep well at night when we know we're doing the job that we're called to do, and we get to do that together. So it's awesome. So thanks so much for hanging out, Productive Pastor. Our next episode, kind of continuing this series, I'm going to talk about how to get your calendar under control. You'd be blown away with how many pastors I talk to that don't have their calendars under control. So we're going to talk about that. See you back in the next episode. Thanks so much for listening.